Hello. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. I see Kerniko's in the chat. If anyone else is out there, just let me know if everything looks and sounds okay. And then we'll get into some stuff. Here's Queen D, bringing us all love. And now, oh, that. So I do have so I was going to work on the flyer elf, but once again, he's going to get preempted by something kind of more timely. So I've got some of the base inserts and bases that Reaper was showing on Reaper Live, and some other people have had them and showing them off. Hi to Archangel YYC and Rathmore TV. So I thought I would have a go, and I'll probably mostly just focus on trying to paint them in different ways, but if there's anything particular you'd like to know about them, or that you'd like me to try out on them, let me know. And as Julia Trent, hi. As most of you are probably aware, I'm like maybe not the best at bases. So I figured, green users, Bob and Julie, I would, go ahead and be willing, as ever, willing to embarrass myself in a hobby way for hopefully to encourage you to be willing to try new things. So I'm going to switch my views. That looks like I should close my shades, actually. So these little stripes of light are sun coming in from my window shades, which I do normally close prior to the show because at this time of year, the afternoon sun does slant in like that. But we'll see if it creates a problem or not. So these are the inserts, and then they come with the standard Reaper rounds that you can just glue them on top of. So the nice thing about that is normally if I paint a base like this, and I have some to show pre-made resin bases that I've bought in the past. If they're attached, then I have to come back and paint the base black. But if these are detached, I can paint these on a different surface and get all the messy part done and then just come and glue them on. I mean, you could do it the other way. If I were pinning something heavy, I might want to attach this first and then pin, so I'm pinning through the insert and the base, and then you can even kind of, if the pin comes through here, I'll sometimes hold it down even further with a bit of putty or something like that. But that is not something I have to worry about today. I'm just going to increase the resolution a bit. But the reason I got them all out like that, we'll just put these other things aside, and I have no idea of what the packaging or amount or whatever, any pledge level type stuff, anything else that's in the Kickstarter, I know nothing. I know about as much as you guys, other than I have some of these physically in my presence. So I'm just gonna get rid of black parts for now. Didn't think about having a place to put them, of course, for now. But one thing I do want to do before I start painting, and I'm even going to put a few of these in there because the chance of me getting to all of these is very remote. But I would like to, I have a bowl of rubbing alcohol that I dip miniatures in usually. But if I'm trying to be fast or for whatever the reason, I'll just use this spray bottle, which I started doing this because of COVID stuff, in the early days when they didn't know, how much was contact a factor. I would disinfect, and I still occasionally, stuff gets on your phone, COVID or no COVID. So I still occasionally disinfect things with the spray. But that's why I have that. You're lucky this isn't smell-o-rama, because now everything's very pungent with the smell of alcohol. So I'll give those a sec to dry. Well, evaporate, I guess, while we work on, I kind of catch you up on where we've been lately. So, zoom in a little. Last week I worked on painting darker skin tones. So I had tried previously to paint this guy on stream, and I had been concerned that the camera really wasn't showing the nuance very well. And I'm still a little concerned about that, but I thought, let's try it on a bigger face and see if that works better. So I got this Frost Giant Queen, and last week I painted a warm dark color skin tone, which is this face, and then a cool one. So the warm one has a lot of orange and maybe a bit of yellow in it, and the cool one is kind of more purple and pink, even gray in the highlights. Now these are not the way they appeared at the end of the stream. As I told you guys, I was going to try to touch them up a little, improve the blending. and then show you before after. Now, I'd hoped to have it up as a web page, but alas, it is not quite done. But my latest blog post is going to cover painting highlights on skin, and dark skin in particular, and it's going to have close-up pictures of these figures and some other figures that I painted and reference photos and all kinds of good stuff. But in the meantime, just to show you before and after, we're still working on getting it working on the computer. So you're going to have to look at my phone like last time, which I know is crazy, but there you go. So these were the 3 figures at the end of the stream last week. So I had done eyes on this one a little bit to show you guys eyes, but that was the warm, the cool, and then this guy that I first started on ended up being kind of in between warm and cool. And then these are what they look like that I was showing you just now. So that's the cool one, the warm one, and then he's kind of in between. And I don't know what I did with them. So they'll be in the pictures, but I don't have the physical things here right now. These are the colors that I used on those specific figures. So this is going to be on the webpage. If you want to paint one that looks like this, you really love that skin tone, it's here. The warm one is here, and the in-between one is here. But then I also just went through all my paints and pulled out. So this is kind of from the left, it's the darker colors. On the far right, those are colors you can mix in for highlights for darker skin. And then at the top are cooler colors working down towards warmer colors. So you can kind of pick a point in the chart that you would want as your mid-tone for your person, and then pick colors from the left to shade it and pick colors from the right to highlight it. And this includes P3 paints that I had and the Nocturna N paints that I had. Those are really the main miniature paint brands that I have on my newly reorganized shelf. So I can't tell you what matches everything, but you can also just print this out and do swatches, try to mix paints or try to get colors that you have and see which ones they best match. So I'm hoping that this will help people find colors even if they don't have the exact colors mentioned here. So anything that doesn't have a letter in front of it is Reaper color. This includes some of the Bones colors, it includes some Pathfinder colors, and then the regular ones. It includes some that are named skin tones, and it includes some that are named things that are brown, because people are really just various shades of brown and tan and stuff like that. Because I mean, even if you look at these guys who are finally finished, there are brown color. Well, okay, I did paint them kind of pink because one guy was going to be redheaded and they were both fair. So there probably aren't a lot of browns in that area, but there are a lot of browns that would work for skin tones, variety of skin tones. Nomad Zeke says, I actually remembered to check without Twitch notification. Well, I'm glad to see you. I don't know if that means that the notification didn't go out. I know sometimes that happens. Sometimes I don't get notified for shows that I'm following. So those 2 are finally finished. That's Chop and Grub, the halfling brothers who run an eatery in the pirate city of Brinewind. And maybe we don't ask too many questions about where they get their ingredients. So you guys are actually seeing them before Ron even. I've taken some pictures, but I haven't edited them yet. So I need to send those pictures to Ron. And then, well, actually, I will get this guy back just for a sec. Because one of the reasons I painted on this figure was that it gave you an opportunity to compare the same figure painted by the same person with a dark skin and a light skin. And I think I'm going to put the picture, I put the picture of these guys in the article I'm working on so that you can see that comparison in higher quality. Because I think you'll agree that for whatever reason, the camera loses some of the nuances of the blending, and things look really stark when I showed you the photos. Hopefully they didn't look really stark. Bob and Julie like the stains on aprons. Yeah, I figured they could not have nice, pristine aprons. They're working too hard and too fast for that kind of thing. And then since they showed this on Reaper Live, I figured I'd go ahead and show you the mystery project I've been working on. Well, one of the mystery projects I've been working on, which is this Tiefling Dancing Girl. I got distracted by working on a different project that you guys have seen, and I'm going to show you where he is now. So I haven't been able to get back to her, even though I'd very much like to. So I started out with the idea of making her hair purple and her clothes kind of teal. But after I started painting, I think the teal is going to be a bit more saturated with color. It's going to steal some thunder a bit if it's this low down the figure. So I switched, and now the clothes are kind of purpley, and her hair is going to be very dark, but like with teal highlights. And she's got a lot. I like painting hair, so I'm excited to paint this big, long, fancy hairstyle. But the one that bumped her is this wag halter that I think you guys saw before. And I don't know if I'm even going to have to... He is pretty dark. This was at Ron's request. You know, he's like a street level thug assassin type guy. And in fact, if you saw the pictures on Reaper Live, the hood was a bit lighter. I wasn't going for the white Assassin's Creed hood, which is what Ron kind of thought I was trying to do. I just was trying to... This is, in my opinion, and I think we've talked about this here. If I haven't talked about this here, I've talked about it on the blog. This is one of the most challenging kinds of figures to paint. So other examples would be an animal, a camouflaged animal in its natural environment, or an army person wearing a camo outfit that's trying not to be seen. Ninja, you know, these characters, from a character point of view, their whole goal is for you to not notice them. When we paint miniatures, the miniature as an object, the goal is to try to make people look at it. So the nature of the character and what we're trying to do as painters is diametrically opposed, which makes it really tricky to do. And for whatever reason I don't understand, Ron keeps handing me that particular puzzle. I don't know why he doesn't throw it on Michael more often, but I seem to be the one who gets that puzzle. And so I've done the Romag Davil was one I did recently. A few years back, there was a Terror the Silent that was a special edition, and then she was in a raffle recently. So that was the one with all the freehand on the inside of the cloak. So I've tried various ways of handling it, and this time I tried a different method, which was to kind of do a color underpainting and then try and keep some of those colors so they're not like bright, vivid colors. Dark Angel, why YYC says because he's wrong. Yes, this is when you start to think maybe Ron doesn't like you when he does stuff like that. So one of the things I think that I'm learning from this experience, so what I tried to do was paint this part brighter to make the focus his face, which is any character that you can see their face, that's people are going to want to look there. So it's good to work with that expectation unless you have a diorama where you're going to set things up so that there's somewhere else that people want to look first. So I had set the face up, you know, the cloth around the face to be a little brighter. And Ron was kind of like, are you done that part? Because I don't know if I love it. And I'm like, well, I'm sort of done, but I wasn't done to the point where, okay, now the whole figure is done and I'm evaluating how everything works together. And as I got to that stage, I was like, yeah, I think the highlighting, the whole hood looked a little too light. I would still probably bring up the highlighting like right there and on the top of that mask a little more, but I think Ron's going to be happier with it this way. So I'm going to leave it this way. But one of the reasons I bring that up is as a painter, you have to decide what's more important to you. So if you're painting this for your game and this is your character or, you know, an opponent that you're painting for your players to encounter, and it's more important to you that the characterization be correct, you have to accept that that's probably not going to turn into the figure that everybody's pointing at on your game board and going, wow, that looks amazing. Or that when you post it on Facebook or the Reaper forums or the Discord or wherever, that may not be the picture that everyone goes, oh, wow, look at that figure. Look at how amazing and realistic it is and it captures that personality. It may do that, but as viewers, we want to look at things that look cool. And if you truly capture the personality of something that is camouflaged, you're not looking at it. So I think that they are poor character choices for entering contests is one thing that I would say that I've learned from this. I can make it so he's going to look pretty cool in the photo that Ron shows you. And I've done that in the past. But I've taken those same figures and lined them up on a shelf the way they would be in a contest. And they are not the ones that stand out. Even if they're one that I put 30 hours into, I can put a tabletop miniature that I used a brighter color scheme on next to it, and that's going to be the one that catches your attention first. So just thought I'd share that, since I think sometimes people get frustrated when they enter contests and they're like, well, I painted it in a realistic way. It's like, Okay, but part of a contest isn't about how realistic did you make the character, it's how much did you make people want to look at the character and enjoy looking at the character. So the goal of a contest isn't, you know, it's the same with a story. You could make a movie that's very realistic and is super boring. You know, a lot of people don't think documentaries are the most exciting kinds of movies, and even within the genre of documentaries, you have some that are more interesting to watch than others because they give you more of a storyline or they find a way to help you get more invested in the characters or whatever. So when contest judges, or especially when regular people are looking at things and voting on stuff or deciding which one they want to win, their assessment is not did they paint this character to look as realistic as possible. Their assessment is, do I like looking at this character? So this character I vote for a completely different reason. If you look at her base started out I'd use like a rubber stamp that had like an intricate carving in it, like maybe she was in some temple or something. But I got to looking at it and I hated it. But you can see how thin her ankles are. So once she was on there, I'm like, well, I do not at all want to mess with trying to pull up the pins and rebase. So the best idea I came up with was just to put some putty over that, and then I pockmarked it. And these things are metal tree stumps that Woodland Scenics sells. But I wanted her to look like she was on an alien planet. So mainly what I did was just use paint to convey the ideas by using colors that go contrary to your expectations to try to make it look like an alien world. Dark Angel YYC prefers to think that Ron has faith in me to make things look good despite the challenging nature of the figure. I can make it look good for a photograph, but I haven't yet figured out how to fulfill the challenge of making it look grubby and real the way Ron wants, plus something that'll pop off a shelf. There's someone out there who can do that, but I don't think it's me. So the reason I'm showing you this is I think we can do the same kind of things with these base inserts that Reaper has made. Which hopefully some of them are dry. So this was intended as like a lava base, which honestly I did not grasp at first because I think I just have never really painted a lot of characters that I would have posed on lava bases, so I just didn't think about it. But I think we could paint this as a variety of different things. So that's what I want to try to do today and see if I can make that work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we'll give it a shot. I'm just going to slap them on here so I don't have to touch wet paint. And I'll probably have to work at a few at a time because paint has to dry. So I just grabbed a whole bunch of colors. And I also have some basing materials. So I may talk about ways you could enhance or shift these a little to go with different kind of looks. Well, I guess out of curiosity, someone else feels they have to do it. How malleable is this material? So I'm not cracking it yet, which is good. It's taking some abuse because it's pretty thin along the channels there. I know people have been saying that when they cut Bones USA that it seems a little more brittle. I haven't done a lot of that because the things that they send me that are on bases, I just paint them on the bases and call it good. But let's clipper some of this and see what happens. Yeah, it seems nice and flexible. Because this kind of thing is easy to do with original bones. So my thinking was you could customize these little... So that did shoot off, but it didn't split. It wasn't like when resin cracks and a part pops off. My thinking was you could have... What did I do with all the black parts? You could put it here and then like have deeper water if you wanted. So I could scrape this down. Scrape the edge down a little, or carve the edge down. Also, let's just note that this is not me telling you to use clippers and X-Acto knives or anything like that. I am not advocating or recommending any specific sharp tool that might cut you. I'm just showing you things that I do, where I hopefully will not cut myself and make the point a little too dramatically. So it wouldn't have to look smooth. In fact, it'd probably look better if it wasn't too uniform. And then I could fill this one with something to make it look like there's some kind of, you know, disgusting pool or something off to the side. Is there any other abuse you'd like me to put this to while I'm doing abusing things? Kuniko said it's not as brittle as printed resin. I had a printed mini explode on me earlier while I was trying to cut it. Wow, explode. I have had them where stuff will pop off. They do seem a lot like, at least the printed minis that I've worked with, a lot like resin where it's a little more likely to break, but it's probably going to break clean so that you can glue it together fairly easily. Because as much as I hate that about resin with the breaking, if it's a clean break and I can glue it back together, and it's going to be about as strong as it was to start with, I don't panic about it too much. I do feel like that's a weirdly symmetrical thing, so I'm just going to rip a bit more. So, I don't have a great thing to use for like quick water. So I've got that within the Scenics water that I think I showed you guys a while back. And I did not remember to bring that out. I do have medium gel that's kind of similar. But what I had heard about this magic and then I forgot to check it out. So this is just super glue. I like, now that I've been exposed to it, I like the Loctite brand. So we're just going to stick that one down, even though it doesn't seem to want to stick. There we go. I just have to, it's not like, they're not bent, but they're, you know, after I abused it, I did wiggle it back and forth. It's not as straight as it could be. But so I was watching Greg Zuniga stream sometimes on Twitch as Wicked Elf, and he had this stuff that was, you pour it in and then you cure it with a UV light, and I was like, what is this magic? Because I've never done an extensive water base or anything because I just don't want to deal with two-part epoxy. And you could even keep this little part and put it on something else. Make one of them twice as big. I just fill it in with sand or something. Yeah, why don't I do that? Because if you alter the elevations of things, then it'll look less like lava. Okay, this is the Ultra Gel, so hopefully it'll fill in some of these texture things. Now, I do realize that the point of these kind of bases, and this is why I like them, and I'm very excited that Reaper's doing this, is so that you don't have to do stuff. But for your commander or your big bad or whatever other thing, you might have a group where you're fine with most of them being on the base out of the box, but you might want to customize one or two bases to look a little cooler. So I figured it was worth demonstrating how other materials can work with this as well. I'm going to give that a minute to dry. Go ahead and stick it in one of these. Put some sand around it. Let's see, what else could I do? I could do stuff like sand. Oh, I thought I would show everybody these as well. I meant to go look up if they're still on sale. So these are little boxes. They're intended for photographs. So they're about the size, 4x6. I think that's a 4x6 photograph. And then they come in a briefcase, like a clear plastic briefcase with a handle. So what I've done is organize a lot of my basing supplies into one, and then I have various bases in the other. So this one has, helps if I open the right side, kind of this dead looking stuff that I thought I could paint one of them to look like a swamp and then put that on top. But these are those kinds of bases that I bought in the past. So I have them organized by size, and then I have all my blank bases organized by size and shape. So I've got all my smaller squares, then my smaller circles, and so on in these. And it's way more convenient than, I used to have all this stuff in a drawer, and everything was still organized. It was organized in plastic baggies by the size or the, there's like a couple of different types of these resin bases that I got like a million years ago. I'm not even sure this company's still in business. So this one kind of has like a carved fancy floor. This is like a dungeon, and I've used this on some variations of these on some of the dungeon dwellers that Ron has had me paint in the past. And this is like a herringbone floor. So I had them all organized and stuff in a drawer, but it was really hard to go through that drawer, and you have to pull stuff out. And so it wasn't as organized as I wanted. And when I saw these at Joann's a few years ago, I thought, well, that might work for, since they're clear. And then you can get them where they're all clear, or you can get them where they're kind of clear, but they have a bit of color, so you could color code them for various things. We ended up getting two. My husband was going to use one for something for board gaming, and then we didn't like the idea of taking all of our board games out of, if you have like little card games, some people take them out of the box and then store them in these, and I felt weird about that. So we didn't do it, and I ended up with two of those things for organizing my base stuff after we renovated and threw out all the things with the drawers that I used to put the stuff in. But if you're into those, at least as of a couple of days ago, they were on sale from Michael's in the US. So I think they're about $15. Their normal price is overpriced. Like do try to wait for a sale, or you will be getting ripped off. Or you have one of those coupons. It gives you like 40 or 50%. Just find a toothpick. So this is just a sandy paste. The paint companies make something very similar. They'll call it stuff with pumice. And I can use this to integrate in that other part and also add some sort of variety. Like if I was trying to say this was more of a rocky beach type of environment. So it's like a mix of rock and sand. But this is a great way to hide edges of things when you've added additional materials onto your base. Or you have even like a rock and you want it to look like that rock has been there for a while. It's good to add some stuff around the edges. Hopefully it's focusing okay. Am I sure that it is a sandy paste? Yes, I feel sure. So this is a Viejo product. I believe that they have, since I purchased this, which was like quite a while ago, I'm going to say at least 12 years, probably longer, they have changed their packaging. So I believe they still have the same products, but they've changed their packaging. So I'm going to kind of try to make this one like on the beach where you get the little pools where some of the animals will gather and kids will kind of come and collect them and whatnot. It's not great to leave it open like this. I should, in fact, this part's no longer still a paste, and I probably should add water to some of that middle part. Some of that's gotten a little crunchy too. Take better care of your things than you see me doing. I'm normally pretty good about it, but for some reason, I guess because basing is just such an adventure for me anyway. I do like that they have that plastic plug that goes in and then you put the cap on. I don't think all of the Viejo and those guys have it, but it is handy. So that will actually only take a minute to dry, but before then, one of the things that's nice about these pastes is they're usually water soluble. So you can get a damp paintbrush, and if there's places where it's like poking up and it doesn't look very sand-like, I can kind of smooth that down, move some bits around, like right there. It doesn't look very naturally attached. I could also, of course, remove things if I wasn't liking where they were placed. With this, but I could just scrape them off as well. And now from the front, at least, from the side, you're going to be able to tell there's a joint. But if it's not a contest entry, I would probably not care too much about that. And work that part in so it looks a little more natural. Need to add solid sandy blob to the label. Yeah. And you can, I have added water to some of these. So the one that I have from Liquitex that's newer that I didn't bring with me. Well, that I didn't bring with me because it's my molding paste. So the molding paste don't have any texture in. Which is still, you know, I could still have used it to fill in that line, but then I'd have more like of a smooth look, and I figured we'll make this one beachy. So the sand does double duty. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to put on first before I start painting. What else have I got? So this is like a sand rock mix. And that could be like a different, you know, maybe a marshy thing. I'm not sure if there's still any glue in that one. I've been meaning to buy more glue than I keep forgetting. So I'll just put a bit of glue on here. You can use white glue for this too, but it dries slower. So for the point of the show, I will be able to paint if I use super glue. I'm just going to spread it around. And dunk it in here and get a mix of rocks and soil on those things. And then sure, why not have more of a rock in the middle here, because that actually is not adhered, and there's like a little bubble thing in the lava there. So to disguise that it's lava, I'll just grab a stone out of here. These are great tweezers for working with base stuff. And you can, there's a smaller version, and I would look for those like in the jewelry section of something like Joann's or Michael's. I mean the jewelry making section. They have lots of nice little tweezers that are about the right size for the things we do. There's bigger rocks. I'm not even sure if this is aquarium gravel or something, but they're nice. They've got a nice texture. These are all the kinds of things you might find at places like Joann's and that. Oh, well, I did have, so I have this Pumice Gel too. This is a sample. It would be nice if Golden did sell them like this. It would actually be kind of handy. But alas, they do not. Now, if I were being cautious, I would dispense this elsewhere and then put it on my thing. But I'm not doing that, since I promised to embarrass myself for your entertainment. So I wanted to make that join look a little more organic. Do something like that. I just want to have some of the texture in a few other spots as well. Or maybe that's a different material. Maybe this is the marsh and these are like floating bits of some kind of plant or another. But yeah, see, this is nice because you can just get some out and then only, you know, you you can push it back in there. Just this little bit at the mouth of the squeeze container is going to get all crusty like that other stuff did. But alas, that is not how they sell that product. I guess they want you to be able to dip in there with your palette knife, so you can spread it all around your painting. So let's see. I got a couple regular ones. We'll put this on here. So here's all. And because I've used that stuff in a pretty thin application, it shouldn't take very long to dry, just as the super glue shouldn't take very long to dry. Put that on there. And I don't know if we'll get this far, but what the heck. I'll get one more ready. So before I, do they sell that in jars in Michael's or Joann's? The paste. So this is the Viejo one. That's going to be a hobby store product. They should have it on Amazon too. The other brands you would look for is, so Golden is going to have what it would be like mediums and pastes and stuff. So Golden has it, which is one of the big manufacturers of acrylic paints in America. Well, North America, really, I guess. And Liquitex is going to have similar products. So if your hobby store has some mediums from Liquitex and Golden, and most of them have some, but they don't have a lot, they may have it. Art stores will have it for sure. And again, so this is going to be on Jerry's Artarama, Dick Blick, should be on Amazon. But what I would recommend doing is go to their web pages, Golden and Liquitex, and read up on the different products and see which one seems most like the one you want. Also, it's not in my, so on YouTube, on the Reaper channel, it's not in the Beyond the Kit section. So it was either RVE or Reaper. So there's Reaper Virtual Expo, but then there was ReaperCon Online, I think. One of those, I did a class that was called Additives, Mediums, and Texture Pastes, oh my. And I demonstrated a lot of these different products and showed this, like what I had. And so if you look on the Reaper YouTube channel, that should be there somewhere. But it also kind of gives you the vocabulary that those companies use to describe their products to help you figure out which one is going to best serve your needs. So if you want something that's a real sandy texture, you probably want more of a fine pumice paste. This was the coarse pumice paste. I think it's a little thicker. When it dries and we get some paint on it, maybe we'll be able to tell a little better. So it kind of depends on what you're wanting to do. This product was something else. This was, this was probably custom made using Woodland Scenics is the main source for a lot of this stuff, although some of the companies that are kind of doing miniature adjacent products have started selling things like this too. So there'll be like talus and gravel and stuff like that. If you have a store, like our hobby town has a really good Woodland Scenics selection because it sells model train stuff. So anywhere that does model trains is going to be a good place to look for scenic and basing things like that. This stuff, I think, is a Woodlands product. Like you can glue it on their tree bases to make trees, but you can use it for undergrowth and stuff as well. So they are the ones who make a lot of this kind of stuff. And there are some companies that target miniature people who make similar products. Or I think some of them even just take this stuff and repackage it. Because a lot of, like, I've bought stuff from the train store where, like, I will never use that much in my life. It's a big amount of something. Maybe if I were making actual war boards and stuff, that would be a different story. But I did forget to bring something over because one of the really neat things that I think they've come up with, and this isn't Woodland Scenics, it's someone else who does it, but there's, instead of static grass, where you kind of have to glue it and then hope you can get it to look like grass and stand up. And the way they do that, the reason they call it static grass is if you are making a big board for a model train or something like that, there's a product that you stick it in to the ground that you've made, and it creates static that makes all the grass stand up. But that's not really feasible to do for individual base size. Julia Trent points out that train shows also have a lot of things that can be used as landscaping and usually have different brands. Yeah, there are some European brands, Knock, N-O-C-K, N-O-C-H. They make some really neat things. Then these guys with the grass tufts. I'm trying to see if I actually have them up here. And I'm just not remembering where I put them. Because I thought I had grabbed them finally. Very cool. But alas, I do not know where my grass tufts are. Because I had hoped to finish some of these things up and then stick the grass on top. But I don't think that's going to be happening. The perils of being a messy person who has to pack everything up and then never unpacked it promptly are making themselves felt. Because I know I had that stuff. I used it on something recently. But oh well. If I figure it out, I'll get it next week and then we'll add it to these things. So, all right, what can I do with some paint? Let's get some paint out. And unlike what I normally say, I have not shaken all of my paints before the show because I pulled out like 30 colors, not knowing if I was going to be doing like Martian landscapes or swamps or lava or what. Maybe I will start with lava, as that is the thing it is meant to be. Yeah, I haven't experimented with Winsor & Newton's acrylic mediums, and wherever you live, there's going to be a company that makes acrylic paints, and that company also very likely makes acrylic mediums. And if they do enough of them, they will probably have texture pastes and effects things. And there's some stuff that's like really cool, but we would probably never really use it. And then there's other stuff that's extremely applicable to what we use. And because it's acrylic, we already kind of know how to work with it. I have found that, like, if I tried to mix the paint in here so that I was saving a step, because this is like whitish gray, it's really going to lighten up my paint. It's probably going to take a lot of paint. It's going to be more efficient, and I can customize my colors better by just waiting and painting over it. But maybe I should start one with lava, since it's lava. I guess I should have kept one out that I didn't spray with alcohol so we could see if it made much of a difference. So the standard advice when painting fire is it's lighter, so it's white and yellow where the fire is hottest. And then, sorry, I seem to have less room than usual. I think I put my computer in a weirder place than I normally do. Then it gets, darker and redder as it moves outwards. And my white paint has just oozed all over the place. But that happens. I like to clean it up a little bit before I put the lid back on. But even I've had lids where it's all gunked up in there. It has rarely caused problems. If it dries up, I'll pull it off. I'm just going to smack some white on here. Because of drying, I suspect that I'll end up working on several of these at the same time. Paint seems to be sticking pretty well, actually. But that's thick, so I will leave that for now. Actually, let's look at some of so before I sat down today, oops, I just got rid of the thing I wanted. So I was showing you these pictures of the stuff that's going to be on the blog, but I also went and looked at some inspiration for different kinds of landscapes. And all these pictures are from people on Unsplash, which this one's by Alex Ree. So this way I can read them, where the other way I can't. So you can see there's kind of a part that looks like a sandy channel and then rocks around it. So it's not exactly the same as this, but it's kind of like that idea. This is a swamp where there's areas with water and then these floating mats of grasses. So that's where I wanted the static grass to put on top after. But maybe I can use that kind of dead foliage look. This is a similar idea, but it's a greener plant with little flowers even. This is a different desert landscape, so there are areas where there are sand and then, tough bushes and undergrowth and stuff. So that's another thing. I could paint this as sand, and then, you know, but I have green versions of those. Actually, I think I have green and autumn versions of the foliage you're supposed to use on their tree armatures. But that is one of the other things that I don't know where it is. And then this is a different kind of swamp, but a similar idea. So I think this works pretty well for swamp. And then on a whim, I looked up moors, and I found a few pictures where there were kind of rocky fields. Probably farmers had pulled the rocks out of other fields and then just piled them up in this field. I don't know the background story, but you could do something like that where it said the grass is going in the middle channel and the things are rocky. But I also, because I had that one girl, wait, I did have more pictures actually. I thought we could look at other worlds too. So, oh well, that's another desert picture where there's like almost like two kinds of sand or mud. And then this is the rover, I think, Mars rover. It's on Mars at any rate. And that's kind of got like rocks in dirt. So I thought I'd sort of do a Martian one. And then this is the moon watching the Earth come up over the horizon of the moon. So you do like a gray rocks version too. But let's work on a Martian one. Maybe didn't pick red enough paint too. Mix like a rusty red and a red together. So for some of these, I should probably be carving off the little bubble that's in the lava. But for the sake of expediency, I will not do that. And what color would I start a swampy one? I need water and land. So I'll start the water a darker blue, and then find some green colors for the land. Or the floating mats of plants. Now, if I were working on a whole unit of these guys, I would spend a little more, you know, I might do one test base, look up some photos, do a test base, to see what kind of colors, you know, paint well, would be easy to paint, make my life easy. It's always worth doing a test figure or base when you're going to be working on a whole bunch of something. Work out all the kinks on your first one or two, so then you can kind of assembly line it and make the rest of your life easy. So I wanted like a dull blue, but since I'm here, let's get a green and mix a few streaks of green in while the paint's all wet. Kind of the advantage of having wet paint is doing some stuff with wet paint. Just kind of make it look like it's got a little floating algae or something in there. In case you guys like that effect, let's see what colors we had. So I was adding Highland Moss to Twilight Blue, I think. Midnight Blue. Let me check. Check if it was Twilight Blue. No, it must not have been because paint's not coming out. Where is my blue? There we go. It was Midnight Blue. If it gets a little too clumpy with the green, I'll just come back with the blue, break it up. This looks a little swirly maybe. places with more green. I mean, on wet paint, you can't always control what it's going to do. And that sometimes it's fun because you can get, you know, there's kind of like a swirly branching thing going on with some of these. It's neat. But if I don't like that, I can break it up a little. Now it's starting to dry down there, so I'm not going to try and mess with that. Then I guess the question is, could I go even lighter on top of that? So this is Bogart Green, which is a Pathfinder color. Probably some of the like undead greens, they're going to be a little duller, but I bet they would work for this too. And I'm going to get the smaller brush. I'm going to mix just a little water in this paint so that just to encourage it to come off the brush, which it does not seem very encouraged to do. All right, let's just try a big glob and see what I can do. Just trying to make it look like there are some parts of this that are thicker or a bit different in color. And I haven't painted the shore part yet, so I'm not too worried about that getting up there. I could have probably put some variation into the watercolor too before I did that, but that would not be too painful a thing to do. But let's leave that a sec. So what have we got? Mars. Oh, he's gonna do like a moon one, so we'll just do like straight up grays. And maybe I will try to wet blend that. Now, I say straight up grays. I'm not using pure neutral grays. I hardly ever do. So I've got Dungeon Gray, which is kind of warm. Ghostwood Gray, another Pathfinder color that's kind of warm. And then Ancient Bark, which is a little bit cool. So hopefully that will create an interesting contrast in addition to the value contrast of lighter and darker, the contrast of the temperature. And is that dark enough? So I have coal black. There are a variety of colors. I could do that. I just am going for a dark color that's not straight up black. Although straight up black would be fine too. I would probably go with a warmer black like Dragon Black. Alright, so where was my moon picture? Maybe I'll look at that for just a sec. So the parts that are away from the sun, the shadows are pretty significant. So that's a useful thing to know. So I need to decide where my sun direction is. And if I do it, that the sun is from this direction. Let's see, if I do it from this direction, I'll be able to shadow like that and that. So that'll be interesting. And I might have to come back in after the next step and bump those shadows up to make sure they're shadowy enough. This may work well enough for this. Just get this color all over to start, and then I'll start messing maybe. Not that you can't do dry brushing and washing on some of these, and I do expect to be doing that. It's just then I'm doing this partly because so you don't have to wait for paint to dry to watch things happen. So if it's lighter towards the sun, I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm adding these lighter paints as well. paint on there. And then I'll attempt to make it look not like total chaos. So when I wet blend, I always like to have some paint on here so that I'm confident I'm not pulling paint up. And these are meant to be rocks, so it's not like I can't come back after and add some dry brushing and washing and stuff to smooth things out. So I wish I did have stuff I could share with you about what's going to be in this Base Boss Kickstarter, because I'm very curious myself. As much as these lava bases are fun, I'm really crossing my fingers to hope for like cobblestones and kind of more man-made constructed things, because I would say of the basing tasks, making natural stuff is a lot easier than making man-made, old ruins, things that look like a city, stuff like that. I have some basing stamps, but those are not as accessible as one might wish to recommend to people in general, and it's like a multi-step process because you got to do it with the putty and roll things out and all these things, which is fine, but if you're in a hurry, nothing beats having a ready-made base. I'm going to have to try and look a little closer because I do not entirely able to see what's happening. Because being all old and stuff. Figure out make this kind of light, and maybe we'll just throw a wash over it to finish it up. Bring out the textures. Alright, so that's where now I'm not particularly worried about the edge, because I could come back at the end and fix up the edges. Dark Angel YYC says, and then there are those of us that are base lazy and just don't have the patience even if we have the materials, just guessing. Yes, I definitely would prefer to be lazy or have backup things from when I'm in a rush. Then I know there are people who love basing, and I'm not the greatest at it. I am kind of out of practice too, so I really need to work on that. But not everyone loves it, so there's no reason everyone should have to do it. Or even if you love it, it's not always accessible to you at every time. Like when Ron calls me and says, "Can you get this done by next week?" my answer is much more likely to be yes if I have a way to deal with the base part, or if it comes with the base. But not everyone loves their miniatures coming with the base. So it's really hard to make everyone happy on this front. It is now wet enough that I should stop messing with it. or it's dry enough that I should start messing with, that I should say. Because at a certain point, when things are starting to firm up, you're going to start lifting paint with wet. So I'm just going to leave it at that, I say, and then immediately not do that. And we'll get back to that one in a minute. Let's see how this one is. I'm sure why somebody's trying to call me right now. This one is my marshy one. Trying to think if there's something I want to add. I might add kind of a little bit of the idea that there's some movement in the watery parts. So I started with the midnight blue, and I'm going to take a little twilight, and then oh, well, I don't have the one that's lighter than that. I have Glacial Mist instead of Snow Shadow, so I'm just using a little Glacial Mist. And I want to kind of draw lines on top of the blue. So I want brush with a not terrible point. And for me, if you've been here any length of time, you know that I like true sable brushes. But if you are able to work with not that, then I'm not going to say you have to use that. So I did want it to be like not too dramatic, but that is barely visible. So I'm just going to go straight Glacial Mist, I guess. Some of these blues are not potent colors. I am Turgeon. I missed the beginning. Are these bases only for use with minis that have tabs that can be cut off, or can you cut off the pre-molded base off of standard Reaper Bones figures for these bases? And Dark Angel said they're flat, not slotted, so you should be able to use them for anything you like. I think dealing with miniatures that have bases, or how to get miniatures on bases, is a topic for another day. But just to real quick, let me find a victim here. This is my bag of sad miniatures. For sure, the original Bones formula, this is super easy to do. And this is what I would do if I wanted this figure on one of these bases I'm working on right now. Now, you can do this with just about any base. Back in the day, I used to do this with metal bases. It just took a really long time, and it was a pain in the butt. So if you are stubborn and you have a few tools, you can do this with any base. And those bases that are on the slots, you just cut the slots off, and then their feet are flat. And they can go on whatever base you want. So yeah, some people have miniatures that aren't on bases at all. And some people, you know, this was the original, back in Reaper days, we used to call this a broccoli base. This isn't like a straight up broccoli, I don't think, but it's pretty close. So it's just a very generic texture. And I'm trying to put thin paint over bones, so that's not working very well. So you could kind of do what I'm doing today, where I'm talking about, well, you can paint it like grass. You can paint it like, this is the Ginsu knife of miniature base textures. But it's kind of a nothing texture, and some people would prefer to have a uniform set of textures for their units, or even maybe they just like their RPG characters to all be on the same kind of base. Now this part is definitely harder with metal. So these are Xuron. Xuron isn't the only people that makes these, but I have been very impressed with the Xuron ones, and I've worked with them, so I do mention it. So they're Xuron, but they're specifically close cutting shears, or they cut flat on one side and they muck up the other side. So where's one of the gray bases? You'll probably see it better. So when I was cutting out this section of material, I was using my clippers quite deliberately so that the flat side went along the edge of this thing. No, I did it the other way because I didn't care what happened to this side. But now I will just cut something in half. So it makes a nice flat cut on that side and it's more jagged on this side. I mean, this particular material is not super obvious. Let's try through the thick parts. So that's pretty clean, and this, there's a bit of a step on it. As far as I know, they can't make clippers that cut clean on both sides, or they just don't cut these kinds of materials. But yeah, you start with clippers, and then I would refine this using hobby knives to have it down to just the feet the way I want it. I mean, I'd go around a bit with this first. But yeah, you can do this with metal. My understanding is you can do it well with Bones Black. I have been hearing that people have been finding that the Bones USA's figures can shatter a little with this. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It just may mean that some of the old tools we used to use for metal, like you can get something called a jeweler's saw. So it's like this big, you have a very thin saw blade on this big handle like this. So the handle's like this, and then you have the saw blade here. And you could kind of just go with the bottom of their feet and saw off. I have one of those. I'm not 100% sure I know where it is. I'm trying to figure out if I have a Bones Black I could sacrifice to this. I mean a Bones USA. Feel like I must. Alright. Oh, wait. You original USA. It's hard to tell. And even then, I don't know if every batch of Bones USA is exactly the same. They may mix up the stuff. Again, I will try to do an episode on how do you get the feet of things free so that you can base them however you want, because I know that is certainly a thing that comes up, because you can't make everyone happy. Some people are like, oh, stop making integral bases. We want to be able to put them on whatever. Other people are like, I don't want to have to work if I can just paint this guy on his base and call it a day. I am happy, and in fact I used to work in a game store, and we had both the Warlord and Dark Heaven lines when Reaper just made metal, and we sold very few Dark Heaven because people would either have to glue on an arm or something, or they'd have to glue the figure on the base. It was surprising how much of a difference it made. Like, because people would come in and be like, well, I have a dwarf and he uses a fork or something. And I'd be like, okay, well, there's a lot of dwarves over here in Warlord. There are a lot of dwarf and elf options that weren't in Dark Heavens at that time. And people would almost always pick the figures that they didn't have to glue. Yes, the answer of putting them in a base, and I have used the Reaper bases like this. I think Ron got annoyed about it once. Where are they? So they have made their bases. So there's a small rim here. If it's got just a thin base, you can stick it on here and then use these materials like I've been showing, rocks and gravel. You can glue that on around there as soil, or the pumice paste or sandy paste. That's really easy, especially if it's on a natural base. I mean, this guy's on cobblestone, so it might look a little weird, but you can just, it can be a ruined road or a place in the city where it's not well maintained. It's not like those places are always going to look perfect. But you can also, these Reaper bases, the circles at least, I think the squares are the same. You can just use the other side. I mean, okay, so your base rim is going to go up a little instead of slope down a little. Who cares? If it makes your life easier, you just fill that in with molding paste or that sand or that gravel and call it a day. That's another way to work with integral bases. But again, now I'm going to save that for another episode where we work on integral bases. Dark Angel YYC will enjoy having cheater-based options. Nomadzik, I found that a nice X-Acto works better than jeweler's saw on old bones material. Seems to gunk up the saw blade, or maybe it's just me. But the important thing is to let the blade do the work slowly, otherwise you snap a lot of blades. Yeah, for old bones, knives, and clippers, absolutely. Where I've been hearing people have concerns is that with Bones USA specifically, that it's a more brittle material, and that's been the trade-off. So with if you want more detail, the material starts becoming more brittle. So it's kind of, is durability most important? Because you can literally run these things over with a car, original bones. This is not a theory, it's been done. When we first started showing them, actually, I went with Reaper to a convention, PAX Prime, actually. And we would throw them on the ground and tell people to step on them. And they were like grinding their feet down and stuff. Some people, of course, would be like, oh, no, you can't step on a miniature. I'm like, no, get in there. Have fun. And out of all those, I had like one little kobold, I think, that by the end of the weekend, his foot had snapped off the base. And that was it. I think there was another figure that had like friction damage from the heat from being ground against the floor. But Bones Black are kind of in between. They hold detail pretty well, but they're still a fairly durable material. But then Bones USA, which, I mean, honestly, other than, you know, where the mold lines are, like well, not that resin doesn't get problems. It's almost as good as resin to my mind for, you know, in terms of the crispness of the detail and all that kind of stuff. I mean, these ones that I painted for Reaper, these were just straight off the store shelf. These are not master copies. So the thief guy this is a metal figure because the bones wasn't ready yet. And oftentimes I do end up painting metal figures like that. Or prints, 3D prints. But these guys had already been made. There weren't any masters or 3D prints available. I literally went to the Reaper store and picked a couple of packages up off the shelf. And I like to at least pick a couple to make sure I get one that, you know, the mold lines aren't too bad or the cast is pretty good or whatever, since it is for the Reaper Studio collection. But that's it. These are genuine Bones USA. The same thing like you guys will buy. And the detail was quite lovely. I mean, the little eyebrows, like I didn't make that up. The little eyebrows are sculpted on there. The little teeth are sculpted on there. All that detail is in there. But let's see what happens if I try to clipper this guy. Because people are saying sometimes the leg breaks off. This is probably not the ideal one to test with, since he's got short stubby legs. That makes the legs a little sturdier. But yeah, so far I'm not having trouble. It definitely feels a little different than the Bones did. It's got more of a snap to it, but it's... Okay, that did go halfway across the room like real resin would, but I'd say it's still a little softer than a real resin. But I have been seeing threads on Facebook of people who've been doing stuff like this, and they snapped a part off. Now, it should break clean. Like, in theory, I could be able to take this and glue it back on, and it should be just fine. I've certainly had to do that with plenty of resin miniatures. And so my husband is legally blind, but and the thing we renovated when we renovated is now we have they're not hardwood floors, they're vinyl floors, because we can have a flood and it won't matter. We have waterproof flooring. This is again not a theoretical thing, because it's happened. But before, we used to have this like disgusting cream colored carpet. It was very similar. It wasn't the exact same color, but it was the very same value as this is the most common color for resin, fancy resin miniatures, I would say. And I was working on actually I think 3 times I was working on fancy resin miniatures, which makes me very nervous. And at least until I learned that the breaks can glue clean, then I was less nervous about it. And I would have a part like that, do that. But it wasn't even because I was clipping. Like in this case, it was, I would think I was trying to glue on the arm. I was trying to file the arm. So I was trying to get all the mold lines off, scrape it with the hobby knife. And it broke in 2 places, this little tiny arm. And one of them just disappeared. It was probably the middle piece too, because that's how that goes. And he was able to come in and find it on the floor. Like I looked all over before I'm like, okay, now I'm going to ask the blind guy to help me because I got nothing left. And the next time it happened, he was able to do it again. The third time, unfortunately, even his superpower did not work. I lost the figure's hand. That one didn't fall off. It was a separate part that you were supposed to glue on, and I didn't glue it on in time before I lost it. And then she just didn't have a hand, so I had to go find a metal miniature that was in a very similar position and steal her hand. So yes, there are definitely ways to get the other miniatures off of things so that you can get them onto these bases if you decide that they are cool. But now I shall go back to painting, especially since some of these things are dry now. So this white, it looks like it's going to need another coat if we want to paint convincing lava. Let's see. Where Squirtle is sad about the poor little kobold that lost a foot. It was sad. He gave his foot in a good cause, though, because we got to show lots of people how cool bones were. I mean, that was before they'd come out, so they were sort of an unknown quantity. That first Bones Kickstarter, I don't know if anyone's here who was in on the first Bones Kickstarter, but it was weird because it started off and it was just, you know, very chill and like, yeah, people were pledging, but it was, you know, $30,000 or something the first day, or maybe not even that. And then it was the last week or the last few days that just turned into like a runaway train. And it was really weird. We had no idea that was going to happen. Let's see. I want that to look like vegetation, I think, on the sides. And then we could glue more vegetation on top if I knew where my vegetation was. Nomad Zeke said the first Bones Kickstarter was a springboard into Pandemonium. Yeah, it was just, wow. I mean, people do it now from the beginning. Like, you're glued to the comments and waiting to see what the unlocks are. But that time, I mean, I think it broke Kickstarter. Like, the last couple of hours, there was so much traffic that Kickstarter kept going down. I mean, they're more robust now because that wasn't the first. Well, around that time, there started being Kickstarters like that just went wild. Sorry, I'm experiencing the effect of my not having thoroughly mixed my paints before I started the way I normally do. I had a little bit of medium separation on that one, but I'm just going to learn to live with it. And what other color might we put? Yeah, that's a good color. But again, I'm not telling you guys what I'm doing. So I've got Goblin Green, Troll Hide, and then I have a darker khaki green. Where did I put it? Gobbler Green. So unfortunately, what I would like to be using is olive green, but that is one of the colors that got canceled. Military green. So there aren't a lot of light khaki colors right now, but I figured I would kind of fake it or make it look a little funky by using gray bloom. So that's what color that is, instead of a yellowy khaki green. And if I have to end up mixing in some, you know, I've got some like cream color, I'll probably add the yellow part. I'll do that. All right. Maybe I will use this smaller. But blending, it's nice to use a bigger brush if you can. So there's those sections where I got stuff on the edge of the little floating vegetation, but I don't care. For those who came a bit later, these bases are intended to be lava. So that's why I'm working on this. When you paint fire, you kind of start with white to be white hot in the middle and work out from like yellow, orange, red, and then the black on the little cooling lava parts. But in showing these, in addition to, you know, putting them through some paces of, well, what will they take in terms of damage and whatnot, I also wanted to look at, you can do a lot with paint. So that's enough. When you if you start sculpting bases and you're worried that you're not great at it, you can disguise a lot of sins with paint or by putting on additional materials, like how we added the sandy paste over sections to disguise that I had cut them or glued them together. You can do that same kind of thing with bases that you make as well. So of all of the things, bases are something where you shouldn't feel like you have to be amazing at it right out of the gate. Because you don't have to be amazing at it. I just kind of want that to look like weird floating vegetation. And ideally I want to put some kind of grass or something on top of there. But, you know, maybe this is not a miniature that I want to spend forever on or a ton of money or whatever. These are just going to, like, grunts that are going to die within a few hits for my game. So maybe I don't want to take the time and put stuff on there. Maybe we're just going to call my little modeled paint, you know, low growing grasses and call it a day. That probably works too. Hopefully you can't hear my husband's super boring conversation in the background. But let me know if you can, and I will shut my door. And then one of the things I've noticed with painting this kind of thing, here, we'll just let the wet paint make it look sort of like flowers and leaves. We have this thing as creators where we want to be real symmetrical and add order to things. But that's not how nature works, and it's not that interesting to look at. Let me see if I can just close the door a little more. You don't want to hear what he's saying. If you have insomnia, this discussion will probably cure that. Let's see if I can put just a little bit of darkness in there. So and you kind of have to fight yourself sometime on that urge to, like, oh, I put all this light green over there, so I should put some over here as well. Like, you'll just kind of be in the zone and you'll start doing that, and it's often the wrong impulse. It's just like, I think we've talked about in the past, when you're highlighting and shading, it's every fold doesn't get the same shadow level, and every crest doesn't get the same highlight level. It's got to be based on where it is in relation to the light and stuff like that. So in this case, it's more, okay, are all these plants going to be like exactly the same? Even if there are environments where they would be kind of similar, it's going to look more interesting for your viewer if you mix it up again. Marilla says, nature laughs at our human concept of symmetry. Unless you can do fractals in your head, then it's very symmetrical. I can't even do basic math in my head, so nature can laugh at my notions of symmetry. Now, we do, as humans are attracted to symmetry. I mean, that's what beauty is, symmetry, essentially. What we consider beautiful, a lot of it are people that are very symmetrical. The belief is that we're drawn to it because it indicates that you have strong genes, and also that your genes express themselves in the most optimal way, like you had enough food and water and everything when you were young, so that your genes express themselves. optimally. But yeah, I've noticed that's a real hard thing as a creator. I think some of us are drawn to this because it's kind of a way to impose order on something. But depending on what you're doing, orderly isn't the right answer. Even for freehand or something like that, if you think about it, these are, and you're painting fantasy characters or other kind of pre-industrial people, everything isn't going to be perfect. Like they were human beings, craftsmen. Yes, they were good at their jobs, but that doesn't mean that they got everything perfectly right all the time. Like humans cannot produce things as uniform as machines as a rule. I mean, okay, Bob and Julie are there in the chat being the exceptions to the rule because they can make, pretty symmetrical faces and feathers and all of that kind of thing. They're very uniform, but most of us humans cannot do that. Even other people in Bob and Julie's field who are skilled are not, as magically skilled as they are. All right, I had been trying to paint like kind of motion lines here in the water. Back to that idea. This is definitely an area where I should be probably looking at what swamps look like a little more. But I think I like when you drop paint into wet paint, you sometimes get these kind of interesting blooms and movements that look sort of like something that flowers and leaves would actually do. So I'm actually pretty happy with this one, even though I don't have my fancy grass to put on it. Let's see if it dries and it looks as cool as it looks right now. This would probably work for stone too. Julie laughs and says, don't look too closely. I have looked very closely at some of your stuff. But yeah, it is amazing how when you're painting a miniature, sometimes just one eye is just like that little bit smaller or something. And it's almost microscopic. Like we're dealing in millimeters. It should kind of be beyond perception. But yet there are still times when you're like, it's so hard to get these to match and look the same. So this was kind of my moonscape one. Let's check it. The lava is definitely still wet. We'll come back to that because I never did anything with Mars. So let's do more of a traditional base type painting with the Mars one. I've got charred brown. I couldn't find my walnut brown. I think I have it in a little project pack somewhere else. In fact, I'm almost 99% sure that is what happened to that. So I got this charred brown, and then I'm just going to mix a little black, or I think actually I'll just use the coal black, since I had that out on my palette already, to try to make it a little darker. And then I'm just going to mix it in a wash, which I'm foolishly doing on my wet palette, instead of getting a side thing like I normally do. But I think I have my wash test paper still. So, in case we have anyone new on today who hasn't seen this, I like to test washes and glazes before I put them on the miniature to make sure that they're transparent enough. So for a wash, what I want is definitely have like solid deposit of color, but be able to see some of the underlying text. So I think that's probably right. I mean, this is a fairly dark color going over a less dark color, but what the heck. We will fix it later. We'll fix it in post, right? That's kind of what painting over perhaps imperfectly created bases that you've made is. Think of it as fixing it in post. I do want to try to get bubbles out because they will sometimes dry in the wash and leave this like funky looking little thing. So tilt it to the side a little so you can kind of, it's weird because I can see it with my eyes much better than I can see it on the screen. Maybe I'll try bumping. But you can see that there are little depressions in there. It's nicely sculpted. It's going to work well with the wash technique. I've been moving it around a bunch, so it's gone away from the sides of some of these things. So I'm just going to add a little more wash there and then keep it horizontal while it dries. Do like 2 swampy ones. Make this one like a swampy one. Maybe it was this. This one seemed more beachy or more swampy? I think this is more like tidal pools. So I will. Oh, I've lost that other one. I made this water pretty dark because it was like a swamp, and I think I'll use lighter water because it's supposed to be like beach pools. I think we're still getting some mileage out of adding a little variation with the wet blending, so I'll come back in with my midnight blue. Now I will say I haven't been doing it here, but oftentimes with wet blending, you're either gonna have to do it twice, like go 2 passes, or like I would do a flat coat of the whatever that color was, the glacial mist, and then do another wet coat after it dries, and then start working over it, because there are a lot of colors that aren't going to be opaque enough, or you're going to find that you start, like what I was seeing is I knew I could tell that I was pulling away and getting some plastic exposed, so that my paint job isn't going to be as sturdy. So I normally would wet blend over. I'd either do this like twice, or where was my this kind of thing I was doing with the moon. So if I were having problems or they were more transparent colors, I'd do this again. So I'd do the exact same thing where I put the middle gray down and then added the dark gray and added the lighter gray. In this case, I ended up smacking quite a lot of paint on there, so I think we're fine. If anything, I think I want to do some dry brushing and stuff on there, but I want to get some paint on some of these other options before we do that. So that's a sandy one. Let's make this like a desert sandy one. Caribbean tide pools, maybe. Certainly not North Atlantic. Yes, I guess we don't want to think about it being too cold right now, do we? I think a lot of people are already suffering the cold. We don't need to accent it. I know where I used to live in Toronto, and I believe all of my relatives were complaining. My relatives and friends were complaining about the very, very much snow that they've experienced. We've had snow, actually, which is not super unusual, but it hasn't been more than like a half an inch, quarter of an inch or something. And it's generally melted away after a few days. So it's not even enough snow. It's enough snow to look pretty, like it'll be on top of the tree branches and stuff like that. I always think that looks very pretty. But it wasn't enough for the kids to go out and make snowmen and stuff like that. Which we do get that every once in a while. But it was enough that my cat was really miffed. So we have a cat that likes to go outside. He goes out on a leash. But he apparently does not like to have snow touch his feet. So he was having a lot of opinions and feelings about the snow. But then he'll be like, no, I want to go out again. So you have to keep showing him that the weather still sucks. Like, he doesn't believe it after a minute. He's like, no, you're the one stopping me from going outside. And it's like, no, you have been allowed to go outside. You just don't like it. So I don't know if you can see. Let's try zooming way in. But there are little bubbles here. And this will happen a lot. I feel like you probably can't see it. So there's some there. Let's try making focus. Nope, it's doing the, hold on, it's doing my palette. As usual, the problem. All right, now let's try. You can kind of see just a few right there, I think. There's a big one over here. That whole cluster is actually bubbles, not the texture that's been sculpted in. There's a couple on there. This is not unusual when you're painting over a textured surface, especially if you're trying to go fast. And you may not, like, you know, if I'm just looking at, I can see the big one. I can't see all the other ones that I was pointing at to, not looking with my goggle things. But it's good to look out for, and you can try and pop them with your, the end of your brush. I'm looking for this. This is my secret weapon. So I press it, but, you know, if I spritz this hard, in fact, we'll move these just in case, because you can get paint all around. But I'm just doing it, like, super light. Like, you couldn't even hear it when I first started doing it. And that's enough to pop the bubbles. So I keep this around for that, and then also it is really good at dusting miniatures off when you're trying to take pictures of them, like that assassin guy that I was showing you guys earlier that I've been painting for Ron. The other thing I hate about the dark miniatures, and this is anything that has like a lot of black or dark clothing, is just trying to get all the dust and lint off is like the impossible dream. It's so frustrating. I don't know how many pictures I took just of one angle of that guy to get one that didn't have stuff all over it. So now that, on this one, for people who came late, I chopped this part off of one of the bases and stuck it on top of this one, and then used sandy paste or Pumice Gel. It goes by different names. This particular one is sandy paste by Viejo, and then this one is a similar product by Golden, but they called that Pumice Gel, to kind of blend in the join. So if you've ever used cork for bases and people are like, well, it really looks like cork, that's the secret you're missing, is using stuff like that. Pumice paste or sand. Oh, hi Miniatures Den. We are talking about some base stuff today, painting some bases. I have these base inserts that are a sample of a Kickstarter that Reaper's going to do soon, but I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of show how you can use paint and a few other simple tools to change how stuff looks. So I'm working on one that's a Mars base. Oh, I lost I think the marsh with the floating pools of vegetation, I think that one's almost done. This would be like Caribbean tide pools. It's like a moonscape rocks. This is going to be sandy desert. I think it's going to be more beach desert. Oh, and the base actually is supposed to be lava, so I will probably paint one to look like lava if I get to it. So that's what we're doing today. And these are plastic base inserts, and they come with these things that they fit into. But I figure it's easier to do the messy part first and then glue them in there. This one I made an exception to because I cut part of it away so that I could do a deeper pour of like water effects or something. But since paint takes time to dry, I've been kind of bopping in between the various bases, working on different textures. And for people who were watching my show before Miniatures Den got here, you can enjoy Miniatures Den on Reaper's channel on Wednesdays. And Luca is an excellent painter, and I definitely suggest that you check out his work. I think that starts at like 1 p.m. Reaper time. I'm not 100% sure. So I just want to start getting a first coat on the sandy area, which I think I will start light and do a wash, and with the other sand I'm kind of going to start dark, do some dry brushing, and see where that leaves us. So if anyone has any questions about those base inserts, like anything you want me to try, earlier in the video I did, so I was chopping one up with clippers and then carving it with an X-Acto knife. I did also just kind of twist it around to see if it was very fragile and likely to crack, and it did not. At least not under my weak grip strength. I'm sure that there are people out there who could crack one of those. I did not manage it. So I thought these base inserts were a fun opportunity to talk about how you can do a lot of things with a base through painting. It doesn't all have to be amazing, complex construction. You can forgive a lot of sins or cover up mistakes or just kind of shift what you were thinking with paint. And as an example of a finished one where I kind of did that, I wanted this lady to look like she was on a different planet. So these little pieces that are sticking up are actually metal bits you can get from Woodland Scenics that, if you look at this one, you can probably tell the most. They're meant to be tree stumps. So from natural falls, or I think they had some that were more like people had chopped them down, but I went for the ones where it looked like the tree had naturally broken off. And then just by using different colors, I made it look more alien. So I am going to need another coat of that because that's a light color. It coats pretty well, but it's not going to be opaque, so I'm going to leave that in a minute. I'm considering this one pretty much done. I could go over with like static grass or something like that, but I was figuring I'd show how you can kind of use paint as a bit of vegetation in situations where you don't want to take a lot of time and do something extra. You know, like the characters that it's just not worth it. But now I'm going to just dry brush a bit of the texture that's built into the base. A little extra interest in a few spots. So all of the variations in the green that you were seeing previously were from wet blending. And I had painted some variations on the water as well. Meredith asks, when you're planning to do a custom base like this, do you generally find it helpful to locate the mini on the base before adding effects, or is that not necessary? If I'm working on something that I'm putting a lot of time on, I absolutely want to do that. So I would, where did my character go? I would, if I can even, especially if I'm sculpting, I'll take the feet of the miniature like this and kind of press them in where I want them to be at the end. So I might even let the putty sit for a minute to make sure it's not too soft, and then just very lightly press them in so they have that indentation, and they will glue in. Partly then I know when I'm painting and everything where their feet go, but also it should help them glue in a little better. In this case, you know, it would be good for me to think about where I wanted to locate her before I put the sand on. I could get her onto the sand, but it's going to be harder. So now I'm either working around the sand, which is fine, but if I know that I have a specific composition, or, you know, sometimes the feet are barely fitting on the base, so you definitely want to make sure that there's a good solid place for them to go. Because one of the things that you'll see sometimes, especially if you have to pin or glue figures on like this, so where they're not built into the base, like this guy is, but where they are freestanding and then you're putting them on a kind of a base like this. You want the feet to look solidly planted. Like you want them to connect completely to the ground for it to appear as if there's weight. The character has weight, like they're a real person that's experiencing gravity. So like her feet are pinned, but then I was using putty around them so I could fill in any places where it might have not looked like her feet were pinned. And that's what I would do here. If I put the character on and it did look like she was floating, or I did end up having the foot on one of the sandy bits, I would come in, you could go around it with a little more sand, or I would probably just take putty or like that flexible modeling paste, since that's a one part material and I wouldn't have to do anything else. So that flexible modeling paste is like this paste with the sand in it. It just doesn't have the sand in it. I did bring even this stuff. So this, no, that's not it. I thought I brought over just straight gel. I meant to bring over matte gel because you can use that to attach grass and things. And it looks like I did not bring it over in the end. So I pulled it off of my shelf and then did something mysterious with it. But this stuff is basically, you know, gel acrylic with bits added. So you can get gel acrylic that doesn't have bits added, or you can get this modeling paste that is gel acrylic that has a little bit of chalk or ground up marble or something, so it's white and it's a bit stronger. And you can use a toothpick like I did with the material at the beginning and put it in around their feet so that it looks like they're standing more solidly. And it's water soluble, so after you do that, if you ended up getting a little bit on your base where you don't want it, you just get a damp brush and rub it off. But yes, I will try to remember to do a show on detaching things from a base you don't want to use and then attaching them to a base you do want to use, and then I'll have some bases here we could play with, hopefully. Let's do the lava before I wimp out on that. Since this is meant to be the lava base. And this might take a minute. Keep losing my paper towel. It's very close quarters over in the side of the desk where the computer is. I don't know if I can wet blend this part. I do want to leave some of the white showing though, so I'm just going to come back in. I'll lift it off. Let's work those edges in a little more natural. And then for the top dry brush, so the problem with dry brush is I want to do them. No, it's not too big. What's this one? Oh, for the yellow, I'm going to be pushing it right into the texture. I am Cheer John asks, so are these base inserts that Reaper is releasing in a few months? Yes, this is a sample of a style of base insert that Reaper will be releasing, and then the bases that go with it. I believe these will start through a Kickstarter. So they're working on a Base Boss Kickstarter, and this I had been working on cutting this one, is why it looks a little weird. So I imagine there will be different textures other than this lava that goes on here, and different sizes. I think if you watch Reaper Live from last Thursday, which is probably up on YouTube already, because I think Quindy is hoping everything be very prompt now. You can see it had some samples of larger, like diorama or giant monster type bases as well. But so my understanding is there's going to be a variety of sizes of base that will be part of this project. Now, I personally would be happy to see plenty of this and maybe like one size up. Those are probably the things I do most often. But absolutely, we're going to need some epic bases for dragons and giants and all of the many monsters that we now have access to via previous Reaper Kickstarters that we were. So we, some of the Reaper artists play a D&D game every other Friday here on the Twitch channel. And whenever a monster shows up, we have to talk about who sculpted it and is, making us suffer that day. Whose fault is it that we're about to die? So those guys need good vases too. I'm Turjan, says, thank you. I hadn't really paid attention, but I heard them mention something about them. I will wait until there is a general release instead of a Kickstarter as well. Yeah, I don't know what the plan is for Kickstarter. If Kickstarter is not your bag, I certainly understand that. Well, okay, I guess I don't personally understand that because I'm a super backer or whatever, but that is not... Some people are more sensible than I am, and I applaud those people. All right, looks like Mars is kind of dry. Running out of palette space, sadly. I can try to work around it. Just standard dry brushing thing. This is one of the makeup brushes. I'm not sure if it's one of the ones I was testing with you all. I think I did end up testing it because it's like a smaller size of some of those big ones. And I do want to get some of this middle area as well. This is probably a base where I should have used my X-Acto knife to get the bubble off, but maybe I could turn it into something else later. Maybe I stick a plant on top of it. Now I have a Mars that has a plant, apparently, but we're going to colonize Mars and give it plants. Actually, the dirt where I live is really orange, so it's almost like being on Mars. Not really. It is something that's one of those things where I was talking about, you know, researching what things look like if you're going to paint a whole army of marsh bases or something. Looking at some pictures of marshes is probably a good idea before you go too far down the rabbit hole of the painting. And I would say that about dirt. Like, everybody is always like, okay, dirt is brown. It's like mostly dark brown. But dirt can vary, significantly. So there's me making a mistake, but we're going to see if we can fix it the old-fashioned way, which is just to scrub it off. And I actually have, I didn't have it handy enough to use, but I have an old brush that I've cut down, and these are good for two things. I wouldn't use the same brush for both of these things, but if you have those kind of pigments, powders where they stick better if they're agitated, you kind of scrub them into the surface. A cut down brush is good for that, and it's also a good instant eraser. Yes, someday I intend to paint a miniature with the color of dirt where I live. Which is, I mean, you can see it from the sky when the plane is starting to touch down, that it's just this super funky. It's a little bit wet there still, so I don't want to dry brush over that. Dry brushing is right in the name. That maybe it's safe. And let's see. One lighter mix. I think it's lighter. Get in there just a little bit more. Really show off those textures that have been sculpted on here, which I believe this was sculpted by Daryl Roberts, is what they were saying on reaperlive. There was not any information on the blister pack I was sent. Now I will Thank you very much for the subscription, Shotokami. Really appreciate that. Some of the... So that's the Mars base, pretty much. I mean, I could go in and kind of try to pull up some of the shadow lines around the rocks or something like that if I wanted, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Depending on the function of the miniature, that might be more than enough. How wet is this one? Still a little bit wet. Let's work on the lava again. So I started with pale saffron. Well, I started with white because white hot fire, it's white hot where it's hottest, which is the inside of the fire flame. In the case of lava, it's hotter in the ground, and then these parts are cooling and turning into rocks. So then that's sunrise orange. I'm not worried about leaving too much yellow here because, as I mentioned, these are eventually going to be, you know, almost black. Just want to have a little light showing through. But for the orange and the crevices, this is one of those occasions where a paint being a little more transparent is not necessarily a terrible thing, because it's going to be easier for me to paint on the outside and not have a lot of lines showing. That will get harder as the colors get darker. What's next? I have Magma Red because it was right in the name. That it seemed like I should use that one for today. So it doesn't shake so much when I'm doing the dry brushing. It's probably not fun to watch the shake. Shotokami asks, if you were going to paint something roughly the color of a caterpillar bulldozer, what would your base color be? I would first look at a photograph of a caterpillar bulldozer to remind myself what color that is, because offhand I don't know. Is it the yellow one? I would look at the color, and I would probably, if I were really concerned about matching it, I would print one out and put drops of my paint on it, on the picture, not on the... I mean, I guess if you happen to have a caterpillar bulldozer heavy, you could put it right on the bulldozer. But if it's not yours, I don't recommend doing that. To see what color best matches. So I would start with a photograph, is my answer. And I don't have a photograph of one handy. I can try to look at one in a minute, but I want to see if I can at least get through the lava, since that was ostensibly what I was supposed to paint. I'm Turjon says, I usually get to watch your episodes as VOD, so it's nice to be able to ask live questions. You're always so patient with your viewers, even if, like me, the questions are kind of basic. So thank you for all that you do. You're very welcome. And we all have questions that somebody else is going to think is basic. So I don't try to be judgy about that. We're all starting in different places. Like, honestly, my first questions when I first started miniature painting were base stuff. Like I'd go on Cool Mini or Not, and I'd see people with these like amazing bases, and I'm like, how do you even like? I don't. What are you guys, magic? Like, how are you making this happen? So, as a thank you to all the people who've been very patiently answering my questions all of these years, or I guess more as a pay it forward, I do like to try to. Now, I'll admit there are things now that I don't go out of my way to go on to forums and answer. Like there are questions that I have answered so many times that I don't seek out opportunities to answer those questions again. I don't mind if somebody asks me those questions and it comes up to answer it, but I don't go nuts trying to find ways to answer those questions again. Like I try very hard not to get into priming bones discussions for an example, since I pretty much said what I felt needed to be said about that one in my FAQs, and if people want to not believe me, well, okay, that's your problem. I'm not going to argue with people about it. I did used to argue in the sense of saying don't assume that your experience is going to be universal and tell everybody else that what worked for you is going to work for them. But eventually, even that became exhausting. All right, so what I'm up to, Brilliant Red. Yes, the yellow bulldozer cover. I would have to get up and go look at my paints and a picture. And if I were painting something that I was going to put time into, I really would probably print that picture out to do a live comparison. Because trying to judge something that's on a screen versus look at something that's physical, so your paint is physical, trying to match that to a screen color, in my experience, is not great. It's just, they're just so different. Your light versus pigment is so different that if I print the picture out, then I'm turning it into pigment versus pigment. I can try to look at one for next week, but I don't have most of the paints that, like, I have 800 paints. I really don't know whatever color every one of those paints are. So I would have to look at my actual paints to come back with a suggestion, which, if you remind me, I can try to do. So send me a note in Twitch that I may not see immediately, but I will hopefully see eventually, and I will try to do that. I mean, I may not print it out. I may be giving you my best impression based on what I see, but I think it's 800. My husband actually added it up. It's 8 nail polish racks worth, and I have run out of space. You can see a picture of it on my current blog post, which will get replaced. I mean, it won't get replaced. It'll still be there. It'll just kind of scroll back. You'll have to look for it. Tonight or tomorrow, with the pictures of the dark skin people and the information on how to paint highlights. But currently what's up is a post about organizing your paints, and it has a picture of my shelves, because I did just do the organizing thing and consolidating, which is why I'm able to include some additional paint colors on my graphic about painting dark skin. Unfortunately, fire is one of those things that until you get to the done point, it's a little bit like non-metallic metal or OSL or something. It's not really all going to come together until I put the dark brown on, which I think we're just about there for. And there should be a little more of the red colors around the edges, but I'm going to skip ahead to the brown on the tops and then return to that perhaps as soon as I figure out what I did with my charred brown. I often use walnut brown for this purpose as well. But since it was right in the name and I couldn't find my walnut, I thought, well, charred brown sounds like it'll be good. substitute for that. And I'll probably do 2 layers because I could see on my paper towel that I still had a lot of red in my brush. You can see that now everything, the lighter parts are starting to look more fiery because of this darkness. So I would put this color, even if I was just painting like a torch, I would put this color on the very tip of the flames. And then you could even go right up to black. I cannot believe how drippy my paint is. I feel like all my paint's went on the flight without telling me. I'm going to use a light hand because I don't want to cover all the previous stuff up. So you can really see the difference between the 2 that I've already finished and the one that I haven't. Shotokami, my intent is to airbrush yellow ochre from the KS5 colors as my shadow color from there. I'll punt. That'll be a nice color to use because it's nice and opaque as well. It is a pretty potent color. There's also the question of what is your lighting scenario, because lighting can shift colors. So that is, I got a little bit of the darker color in there, but that's fine. It's just floating. Floating ash or something like that. Little pieces of rock that are starting to. And maybe this part's a little too wide. I don't know. But I think that doesn't look too terrible. Hopefully it doesn't look too terrible to you guys. Make some of the edges look a little less regular. So that's the lava one, which is pretty much done. Let's pop it off and put it in one of these fancy things. I mean, I guess we should paint the edge of it black too, or like whatever it's in, but that's what it would look like as a finished base insert. And then what was the other mostly done one? I keep losing my swamp. Yeah, I believe the bases are going to be produced in the USA. I think Ed said that there's a secondary facility if they can't make all of them in a timely fashion. So my expectation is that it would fulfill fairly quickly and hopefully go into retail fairly quickly too. So that's what the kind of floating swamp vegetation one would look like, fully based. The Mars one is pretty close to done too. Mars. Should probably paint that as a little rock. Put another little rock on there. I do recommend painting basing materials. So where I added the little rocks around here, I wouldn't have left that for the end. I would put the, even if the rock was the color that I wanted the rock to be, I would still paint it, because things, it's not going to look in scale to your miniature unless you paint it. So, you know, for home game use or whatever, it's your life, you can do whatever you want. I'm just saying, from the point of view of trying to paint miniatures to enter contests or post online and get enthusiastic response and stuff like that, you paint just about everything on the base. Even with stuff like static grass, you can add a little wash in some places. You can dry brush the tops of the vegetation so it looks has more depth, has some color variations. We were talking about how nothing's symmetrical, so sometimes those products from, you know, those pre-made products from other companies can look a little too symmetrical. So we were positing the sun is kind of coming from that direction, so I'm just adding a little highlight to the edges in the direction of the sun. And bringing up the texture a bit on the new rock base. So that's why the shadows are in those specific places. That bit ended up looking a little streaky, so I'm just kind of messing with it a little. Try and improve that. Make sure the shadow is like in roughly the right spot. So that's the moon base one. I'll call it good enough to be done as well. That's what it look like on the base rim. So it's after 5, but I didn't quite get through all of these. Maybe I'll keep going another time, but it sounds like we definitely need to have an episode on getting figures off of bases and getting figures onto bases, which definitely there is some fun there. So I can understand why people would want to know that, but I think I probably need to wrap it up for today and let Quindy go on with her life and everything. So hopefully you enjoyed that and found that useful. If you have questions later, like some kind of test you'd like me to do with these basing materials, or I mean with the, you know, the things that Reaper's working on, send me a personal message here and I'll see if I can do that next week and get you some more information about them. So I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you had a good time. I'm pretty sure that Quindy's going to find us raid to go on. Oh, you're very welcome, Marilith and Shotakami, and I am Turjan. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, Julia Trinity. You guys made it all the way through. Thank you. It wasn't too boring today. That was like frantic speed painting almost. And I don't always switch between projects well, so that was kind of a interesting like game show painting or something. But I see that we do have a raid going. We're going to go visit Phoenix Miniature Art. So say hi, spread the Reaper love, and I'll see you next week.